Hello and welcome back to Build Propulsion Lab at Devoxx France 2024, coming to you directly live from Paris. And with me, my next guest, Jérôme. Welcome.
Thank you.
And as you guessed by Jérôme's T-shirt, he is going to talk to us about Kubernetes.
Yeah, well, I had a talk about Kubernetes tips and tricks, but I think something even more interesting is about the very nature of tips and tricks, in the sense that when we built that talk with my co-speaker and amazing friend, Tiffany Jernigan, we're like, okay,
Tiffany, where is Tiffany? I miss Tiffany. I didn't see her for. Is she around?
She was. I think right now she's in a plane on her way to Devoxx, Greece, or maybe landed there already.
Well, that's
But yeah.
Tiffany. She's everywhere. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
Tiffany is a old, like many years friend, and it's a bummer, but I'll catch her next time in the next conference.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So she was. Yeah. So you spoke about the document. Sorry.
We were trying to find, like, okay, the little tips and tricks that people maybe know or don't, and I feel like you could have different buckets for that. There is the thing that if you're a seasoned veteran in this ecosystem, you know these things. I don't know, like a capital weight, for instance. I think most senior Kubernetes folks know that one. Great when you are in a CI/CD pipeline and you want to wait until the deployment of the pod or the service comes up or whatever. So these, I feel like there is a pretty good awareness, like people know about these, and if you're working in a team, at some point it's somebody who's going to tell you about it. Now, there are things that are a little bit less well known, and you end up being surprised when you discover one of them. Like, some folks think about me like a Kubernetes expert, but I'm fairly new in the Kubernetes ecosystem in some way, because I started maybe like 2017 or 18. I started teaching Kubernetes in 2018, let's say. So in a way, I'm like I've been in this ecosystem for 5 years, but it's an ecosystem that is 10 years old. So I don't know if I can claim, old timer.
Yeah, no. If you're half of the lifetime you're there, you're definitely an old timer. I wanted to ask you about that, and exactly what you said. The tips and tricks mean different things for different people.
Absolutely.
And here, I think Devoxx is a traditionally Java conference for Java developers. Now it's much broader. There are a bunch of topics. But I would say still, I think that most of the people here are developers.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
And I would say that for developers, as opposite to ops people, call them DevOps expert, platform engineers, SREs, people who are very deep in the woods of Kubernetes and cloud native infrastructure, the tips and tricks might be completely different.
Right, it might mean something different. It might be on the edge of best practices. You're like, I don't know, don't use the latest tag if you're on Docker and Kubernetes, or it could be something more like we did this before and it didn't work, and so now we want to know that you probably shouldn't do that and look at this other solution instead.
All right, so I'm going to challenge you. The most useful tip or trick for developers that is probably not very, very known.
Well, so small caveat, it depends a lot. And when we say, like the super like clickbaity thing, like, 12 things you didn't know, and there's always someone who's like, I knew all of that. But for me, like a developer who's like, hey, can you make my life easier with Kubernetes? I would like, look at a tool like Tilt, for instance. Because one of the big issues with Kubernetes is this kind of really long thing where I build my image, I push my image, I update my YAML thing, and I do a rolling update, and it's like blah, blah, blah. It takes forever. And very often we put that behind some CI/CD pipeline. So now we're back to the old days where, you just commit and push just to see the thing at the end, and that kind of sucks. And tools like Tilt, it's not the only one, by the way. There is also Scaffold and another one whose name I forgot, but not the only tool. You have to write a Tilt file, which is a little bit of work, but I promise it's not very hard. And then you get this absolutely awesome kind of little web UI showing you the things in your app, the deployments, the containers, etc. And now when you change one line of code and you save, Tilt is going to detect that. It's going to automatically rebuild the right image and push it to the registry, update the deployment. And honestly, when I do that demo, when I teach a Kubernetes class or whatever, it's literally we change the code, save. I go to the tab with Tilt, so we see like stuff is happening, and literally in less than 10 seconds, the code is now running on the Kubernetes cluster. And I think that's really cool, because one thing that made us really productive as developers is this super quick feedback loop. And I think if we embrace cloud native and run Kubernetes, but lose that quick feedback loop, we are kind of losing the ball in the game.
I love it. I love it that you mentioned it. And interestingly enough, I spoke earlier with the guys from Docker. It was Nicolas Delouf and I forgot the name of the other speaker, right? And they spoke about how they added in Docker Compose the exact same feature of auto redeploy when you change a source file, and it will automatically do the entire thing of compilation, building a new image, replacing the image, and running it, and all that while you editing the code. So you will have this very fast feedback loop in development.
Totally. I know they have a talk tomorrow afternoon, and I will be sitting in that talk because I want to know what they're up to.
So this is that, and I think it's fascinating how kind of it's with all this new magical infrastructure of containers, we kind of went away from this mode of operations when we can get this feedback, and now we're coming back. And obviously, as people who are obsessed with developer productivity and build Propulsion Lab in general, in particular, and in Gradle in general, this is something that is great to see, for sure.
Absolutely.
Yep. So that was a great tip, obviously, very on point for us and our conversation. What else?
Well, from that point, I would say it really branches out. I would kind of struggle to be like, okay, one specific tip. Maybe I would say make sure you have a local Kubernetes cluster. Maybe you're going to use Docker Desktop or Rancher Desktop or OpsStack or Kind or Key3D or Minikube, or there's many options. Because, well, okay, small exaggeration, but it's a little bit, if you don't have a local Kubernetes cluster and you're supposed to deploy something on Kubernetes, it's as if you were writing Java code and building your Java code, but you don't have the JVM.
Yep, so like, and the JVM is remote. Or you don't have a local database, and then for everything you need an instance which is far away, out of your control, not available, you don't have the user, it's down, and all the fun is that. Speaking about Docker Desktop and myriad of alternatives, so it was first myriad of alternatives, and then it was Docker Desktop, and everybody like, hey, we don't need to use anything else, and everybody started using Docker Desktop, and then they changed the license, and then all the alternatives like, hey, we're back again, you missed us. And where does it stand now? Can I use Docker Desktop and not bother with anyone else, or do I have an alternative which is an industry winner that I can just take and start using? Or is it still like the wild zoo that it was a couple of years ago?
I think, again, slight exaggeration, but just to get my point across, it's a little bit like Linux distros. Some people are going to be, I'm using Ubuntu, no Arch, no Nix, no this and that. And I feel like it's a little bit the same in the way that, for instance, personally, I use Kind, which is Kubernetes in Docker, because I'm on Linux, and on Linux, I think it makes a lot of sense. It's really easy. I can have multiple clusters side by side with different versions. Sometimes I'm hacking on something, and suddenly I want to hack on something else, but I don't want to break my cluster, so I want a second cluster. Oh, and by the way, I want multiple nodes in that cluster because I want to try daemon sets or scheduling affinity or whatever. So for me, Kind is absolutely awesome. But I'm on Linux and I have a little bit of experience with containers, so I feel comfortable using it. For people who are new to the scene and would be, for instance, on Windows on the Mac, I would say, well, look maybe at Docker Desktop. It's great. When I was using a Mac, I was absolutely using it. There was like no question about it. If you have issues with the licensing model, but you like to have a nice like GUI and everything, maybe try Wrench on desktop because it's, oh, it's almost as good and maybe okay. Keep in mind I haven't used these in a while, so maybe what I'm going to say here is a little obsolete. But the main points where there would be differences were how well it would handle some nitpicky enterprise VPN and stuff like that. Because I remember my former coworkers at Docker spent a lot of time and energy making sure that this would work, and I know that in the beginning of Frontier Desktop, that was not as a smooth of an experience, but that was the beginning. So now maybe they improved a lot. Now, if you are a command line guru and you don't like to have this ClickUps thing, and you're on a Mac, I would say, well, look at Colima, for instance, because it kind of fits that niche. You're on Windows and you want the command line interface, well, look at WSL and the Docker. I mean, it's basically a Linux VM in your Windows machine. And a good friend of mine, he's absolutely like a Linux wizard, but he's running Windows, and everybody's like, what? But he explains, no, I mean, that Windows is just a pile of device drivers to me, and then there is WSL, and I do everything, all my work in WSL anyway, and in the browser, which runs on Windows. So that's another option. And of course, maybe for you, another one will be better. Like, for instance, some folks ask me sometimes, hey, is Minikube like gone, obsolete? I'm like, no, not at all. Like, Minikube is still going strong. And personally, I also have a Minikube on call, like on speed dial, because sometimes you're going to see this tutorial or this example where there's going to be something for Minikube, and maybe it's going to work on your Docker desktop or whatever, or maybe it won't. And so it's great to test on Minikube to be sure I'm in the right context, the right everything. And but whatever you choose, like pick one to make sure you have a local Kubernetes cluster, and when you need to test something, you actually can, instead of being like, no, I need to get my credentials to the dev cluster over there, so I'm not going to do it. Have a local cluster.
Well, this is excellent. Thank you very much. That was very, very useful and insightful. So, Jérôme, thank you for coming. And
thanks for having me.
And folks, so here you have it. Use local Kubernetes cluster. Take a look at other stuff that's going on in this ecosystem. And thank you.
Welcome.
And
thank you.
Stay tuned for more interviews tomorrow. We have another full day of interviews tomorrow here in Devoxx France. And until tomorrow, have a good night and talk to you soon. Bye-bye.